Hello, thanks for being with us today. I'm Mark Masechko with the Myaamia University Alumni Association. This year we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the relationship between Myaamia University and the Myaamia Tribe of Oklahoma. Myaamia University and the Myaamia Tribe of Oklahoma first connected in 1972 when Chief Forrest Olds, having heard about a university in Ohio that shared a name with his tribal nation, showed up on campus unexpectedly during a visit to Cincinnati. What came of that surprise encounter is now a 50-year-long partnership between the two Myamis. This is one celebration and partnership we've been commemorating throughout 2022, including this Myaamia Center webinar series. This webinar series is focused on helping participants learn more about the Myaamia Tribe, the relationship between the Myaamia Tribe and Myaamia University, as well as the relationship outcomes, including the work of the Myaamia Center and the Myaamia Heritage Program. Today, we're joined by Kara Strauss for the fourth installment of the Myaamia Center webinar series. Kara is a citizen of the Myaamia Tribe of Oklahoma and works as the Director of Myaamia Tribe Relations for the Myaamia Center. In her work, she strives to help Myaamia students be successful at Myaamia and also strengthen their relationship between the Myaamia Tribe of Oklahoma and Myaamia University. I'm so pleased to welcome Kara for being here. So thank you, Kara, for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Today's webinar is titled The Myaamia Student Experience. The Myaamia students who attend Myaamia University have a very unique experience at Myaamia, where they have the opportunity to learn about their Myaamia culture and identity while working towards their Myaamia degree. This presentation will provide an overview of what it has been like for Myaamia students for the past 30 years to attend Myaamia University and how the Myaamia Heritage Program has evolved into a 4-year program that includes coursework, advising, and a variety of cultural activities for Myaamia students. Before we get started, I want to remind all of the viewers that there will be time for questions throughout the presentation, so please submit your questions using the link just below the screen. And now I'll turn it over to Kara. Take it away, Kara.
Newe, thank you. Aya cheke, tepewe ni alaka koke awaha nungi ka kikwe, makunza kwa winswaani. Hello, everyone. My name is Kara Strauss. I am a citizen of the Myaamia Tribe of Oklahoma, and I serve as the Director of Myaamia Tribe Relations at the Myaamia Center. And I want to welcome you all here today to this webinar to talk about the experience that our Myaamia students have at Myaamia University. When I'm giving presentations, typically I don't have this much time to talk about just the student experience. So I'm really excited to be able to dig deeper than what I typically am able to do. Before we get started in talking about our student experience, I want to give just a really brief overview of a little bit of Myaamia history and the history of the relationship between the tribe and university, because I don't think we can really understand the student experience without talking about that. So this slide I like to use when talking about the emergence of Myaamia people into our homelands. We say, since time immemorial, we've lived in the lower Great Lakes. And this vest is an image, a rendering of our coming out story, a story that tells us that we came out of the water near South Bend, Indiana. So this was our emergence into our homelands. And from there, we moved south into the Wabash River Valley. This vest was created by a Myaamia artist named Katrina Mitten. And if you pay attention to very many of our presentations, you'll start to realize that most Myaamia people are connected in some way or another. Katrina is actually my aunt and a very wonderful beadwork artist, as you can tell. Here's a map of Myaamia or Myaamia homelands. To orient yourself a little bit, the blue up at the top is Lake Michigan. So our homelands encompass the entire states of Indiana and Illinois, the western half of Ohio, a part of Wisconsin, as well as a little bit of Michigan. So we're talking about a very broad swath of what is today the United States that was Myaamia homelands. The red oval in the middle is what we consider our heartlands, or where our permanent village sites were located. But the rest of this land is the way that we fed ourselves, we clothed ourselves, we traded with other tribal nations. And that's why you see that there are many other tribes listed on this map as well, because this was a shared landscape. This was not just Myaamia homelands. This was the homelands for many other tribal nations as well. And then if you look at the blue dot just below the word Delaware, that is where Oxford is located today. So Miami University is within the homelands of the Myaamia people. And this is homelands for the Shawnee as well. So I just told you that we are the Myaamia tribe of Oklahoma, but our homelands are here in the lower Great Lakes. And that is because of the history of warfare, of treaties, and forced removals. So this map shows each of the treaties that was signed with the United States government. And I know there's a lot of detail. I don't expect you to kind of dig into all of that, but each of the colors represents a different treaty that was signed with the United States, 13 in total. The first in 1795 was the Treaty of Greenville, which ceded much of southern Ohio, including where Miami University is located. So this land is ceded in 1795. Miami University is formed just 14 years later in 1809. So there's this direct tie between the history of Myaamia people and our landscape and Miami University. After the last of those treaty sessions in 1840, Myaamia people agree to be removed from our homelands west of the Mississippi River. And that happens in 1846. Myaamia people are loaded into canal boats starting in Peru, Indiana, and they follow the canal system and then out the Ohio, Mississippi, and Missouri rivers to our first reservation in what is today Kansas. And then this history repeats itself about a generation later with a second forced removal. After the Civil War, Kansas becomes a state and they no longer want tribal nations inside their boundaries. And so Myaamia people are removed again from Kansas to Indian Territory, or what is today known as Oklahoma. So if we look at a map of Indian Territory today, or what was Indian Territory, now known as the state of Oklahoma, you'll see that there are 39 different tribal nations who are headquartered there. That's because many of them, like my nation, were removed to Indian Territory. And you're gonna have to look at the very northeast corner to see the word Miami. That's where our reservation was moved and where the tribe is headquartered today. You will see that it's a very small reservation in comparison to this very large amount of land that we used in our homelands. In about 50 years, we moved from that amount of land to this small reservation in Oklahoma. This had an immense impact on our tribal nation. It meant that we were geographically separated from each other. People stayed behind in Indiana as well as in Kansas. And then from all of those locations, they moved across the country. So this created a geographic dislocation. It also led to language and culture going into decline. Not being near people to practice language and culture, but there are also many assimilationist practices put into place by the United States government that meant our language and culture went into steep decline. And by the middle of the 20th century, our language ceased to be spoken. There will be a separate webinar all about language revitalization. And so if you want to learn more about that, I really encourage you to attend that because I don't have time to get into everything that we do along the lines of revitalization. But the work of the Myaamia Center is directly pushing back on this history of language and cultural loss. So jumping forward in time, I want to talk a little bit about the history of the relationship between the tribe and university. And as Mark said in his introduction, this began in 1972 when Chief Forrest Olds, he visits Miami University unannounced. He happened to be in Cincinnati and had always heard that there was this university that carried the same name as our tribal nation, and he decided to stop by. He went into the president's office And I always like to imagine what it must have been like that day when he shows up and introduces himself as the chief of the Myaamia tribe. And unfortunately, the president at that time, President Shriver, he was out that day. But a series of folks took him on tours. They took him to football practice. And that was the start of this now 50-year relationship. For the first couple of decades, that relationship was really all about individual people coming together and maintaining a connection. So it was all about tribal members, particularly our elected officials, as well as administrators, faculty, and staff at Myaamia coming together to put on educational programs and connect with each other around projects. The relationship really starts to evolve in the 1990s, and there are a couple of ways in which that happens. There is education that starts to get put in place on Myaamia University's campus for the broader Myaamia University community, as well as education for Myaamia students who want to enroll at Myaamia University. So our first 3 students enrolled at Myaamia in 1991. They are the left 3 people in this photograph. And, there really was not much here for them. We have interviewed 2 of these students, and they talked to us about what it was like to be a student at that time. There were a lot of things that were asked of them. This was a time when Myaamia still had their native mascot. They were asked to speak on behalf of the tribe in many ways. And in addition, there was nothing that was required of them outside of just receiving the financial aid and GPA requirements and those types of things. So there was nothing that brought these students together except for occasionally events like the one that's photographed today when tribal officials would come to campus. So they didn't even really know each other, which, as you'll see in what we're doing with our students today, is kind of unfathomable to me, but it's true that really for the first about decade of the Myaamia Heritage Program, our students were not connecting with one another. There was nothing that brought them together, and that starts to change after the creation of the Myaamia Center, which is founded in 2001 and serves the needs of Myaamia people. And this is the thing that makes this relationship really unique. We don't know of any other tribe and university across the country that has a relationship like this one, where the research center on the campus serves the needs of the tribal nation. And we do that through language and cultural revitalization, as well as educational development. So that includes for our students here on campus, we have summer camps for youth and adults in the summer. We have online programs, and much of that is being developed here at the Myaamia Center. And again, this is because of a direct impact of this history of loss. We wouldn't need to reclaim all of this knowledge if it wasn't lost because of that history. I mentioned to you that in the early years of the Myaamia Heritage Program, there wasn't much for our students, but we have over the last couple of decades really tried to evolve this program into a full 4-year program in which students spend quite a bit of time engaging with each other as a community and learning about who they are as Myaamia people. And really, the most important goal is that first one, the community building. We now have a very large group of students, of staff here in Oxford, and we're coming together to practice Myaamia language and culture, and just to come together as a family. One of the things that's very unique about this program, and if you think back on your college experience or talk to somebody else about theirs, is that all of our students are related to each other. We are literally family. And that's not something you get to experience very often outside of sometimes your immediate family members who you go to the same school as. And what this means is that our students engage with each other differently. They know that they're family, and they know that they have a responsibility to take care of one another. And that impacts everything about this program. And I'll talk with you more about what the program looks like today. So I showed you the last picture, was it our current group of students, or the ones from last year. We had 38 students last year, but that picture was very organized. But this is the way I think of them more often, is really kind of goofing around with each other. This is each of the classes of students. And these were all taken at our retreat, which is their first opportunity to come together at the start of the school year. So what is the Myaamia Heritage Program? It is a financial waiver for any Myaamia student who decides to attend Miami University. We start working with students usually in their high school years, and we work with them through the application process. But they apply to Miami University just like any other student. So I have no input on their acceptance to Miami. But if a student decides to apply and is accepted to Miami, they automatically become a part of our program. They must maintain a full-time status, just at least 12 credit hours a semester. They attend the Myaamia Heritage course, which is a 1-credit class that we have for them each semester. And I'll talk more with you about that here in a minute. They attend a couple of required events each year, including the retreat, which you just saw some photos of. They also meet with me at least once a semester. And the point of meeting with somebody from the Miami Tribe Relations office is that I want to be their main point of contact. I do not replace an academic advisor. I do not tutor students. I'm not their counselor. But if they're having issues, they can come to me and I can point them to somebody on campus who can help them with whatever issue that they might be facing. I also work with them very holistically. So I ask them about how they're doing academically, but also socially, culturally, and what it's like to come into this experience, and how they can maximize their time in the program as well as at Miami in general. And then we have some standard requirements of them. They must have a 2.3 GPA in their first year and at least a 2.5 after their first year. So it looks like there was a question that came in about how the Myaamia family at Miami University is different from a sorority or a fraternity. I think the thing that is different about this is that I'm being literal when I say family. We are all related to one another, and it wouldn't take me very long to figure out how our students are related to each other or how I or my other staff are related to them. So for example, my sister also works at the Myaamia Center, and I have many second and third cousins who are in the program currently. And from a Myaamia perspective, we have a value of caring for one another because of that kinship. And so while I understand that other groups like sororities and fraternities build up, they connect with each other in a variety of ways and they have very strong relationships, I do think it's still different when you are actually family and related to one another. So we have started to add more and more pieces to our program to try to support our Myaamia students and ensure that they can be successful. So one of our newest programs is actually our pre-semester program, which will happen just next week when our first year students move to campus. And the purpose of this program is that we heard from our students that it was a little bit overwhelming to be coming to school and have that same transition that everybody else is having, but to also then be joining into the Myaamia Heritage Program, where it feels like every other student already knows each other and they already know some language, they already know potentially pieces of Myaamia culture, and that they were coming in feeling like they were brand new to all of those things. And so what we did is we added this day-long program where students come to campus a couple of days early, and it allows them to meet the other first-year students and really start to build that community among their cohort. We also invite a couple of our upper class students to serve as student mentors. And so they can answer questions, they can talk about what to expect in this experience and really kind of orient them to the program as a whole. But we also use this opportunity to learn a little bit of language, to play some games, to do an art project, and really orient students to what they can expect in those first couple of weeks of classes. And our students have given us really great feedback about this program, that it's helped them feel better about stepping into a brand new experience. Because I'll talk with you a little bit in the future about where our students are coming from. But some of them have never really engaged with the tribe before coming to Miami University. And so it can be a little bit scary to be stepping into a new experience like this. Our students also take part in the Myaamia Heritage course. So we meet every Tuesday, and our entire class, the first years through juniors, all meet together in the class. And the intention of that is, again, back to this community building. We want our students to see each other and be together at least once a week. And so that means we rotate through 3 topics. They don't build on each other the same way that a lot of other classes do. Instead, they're a cycle, and you come into the cycle in whatever year you happen to arrive, and then you take the class for 3 years. And then in your senior year, you do an independent study project. So our seniors aren't required to come to class, although many of them still come quite often. So this year, our class will focus on language and culture. And like I said, there's another webinar that will talk all about language revitalization, and I encourage you to go to that because it's fascinating, the process of bringing back a language, a sleeping language, from documentation. But the reason that we're doing that is so that we can use it as a community again today. And the Myaamia Heritage course is an opportunity for students to be immersed in the language as much as possible during their 4 years here at Miami. This class looks a little bit different than what you might think of as typically if you were taking a second language class, a foreign language. Whereas my experience in those classes is that typically you're doing a lot of memorization of vocabulary. You're being quizzed on spelling, those types of things. Instead, we focus much more on communicative language. So what do the students need in order to communicate with each other in their daily lives? One of the unique things about this class is, they are all students at Miami University. So we do things like provide language for spaces that are on campus. How would you say, I just came from the library? And we can equip our students with that so that as they are talking with each other in the language, they have the ability to talk about their daily experiences. But one of the other things to think about is that this class is about language and culture. And why is that? It's because what is embedded in language? As we're talking, of course, there's a cultural context. And Myaamia is no different in that there is much cultural information embedded in the language. So as we are learning about Myaamia language, we're also learning about Myaamia culture. So, for example, one of the first things that our students will learn is kinship terms, because in Myaamia, we often call each other by a kinship term rather than by each other's names. So when we learn that Inga means mom or that Nusa means dad, that makes sense, right? That you can learn that. But what you're also learning is that from a Myaamia perspective, Inga doesn't actually translate exactly as mom. It translates as my mother and all of her sisters. So I would call my mom and my aunts on her side mother. And Nusa doesn't mean dad, it means my dad and all of his brothers. So again, there's this cultural way of thinking and knowing that's embedded in the language, and we talk about that quite a bit throughout this language class. Next year will be Contemporary Perspectives and Sovereignty. This is Oh, I apologize. I think my pictures are backwards, but so I'll talk about ecological perspectives and history. We think about our environment from a Myaamia perspective. So when we go out into the environment, how are we engaging with that environment? And what Myaamia knowledge do we have that's connected to our environment? So this might be things like learning about our lunar calendar system. Our lunar calendars, every month name is connected to an ecological experience. So we might be in a month called Green Corn Moon, and that is when you can eat the corn off the cob, right? And it's telling us about what's happening around us in our environment. But we're also combining ecology with history, and that's because you cannot take our history away from our geography and our ecology. Our history is directly tied to the places in which those things take place. And then in contemporary topics and sovereignty, we talk about understanding what it means to be a citizen of a tribal nation. Many of our students who are coming from a standard K-12 experience have never really learned much about what a tribal nation is, what it means for that nation to have sovereignty, and what it means to be a citizen of a tribal nation. We also then spend the second semester looking at sovereignty through the perspective of art. So we look at many other Indigenous artists, how they're incorporating their culture into their art. And then we get our students to create art by designing t-shirts. So each student designs their own t-shirt, they present it to the class, and then we vote at the end on the t-shirt that we would like to actually have created. So the picture on the right is from a student who created this design 2 years ago, and the class voted that they would like this to be the t-shirt that's created. Saping Guione at the bottom there means vision or foresight. Again, a value for Myaamia people. And so that is what this shirt means to them. So we just got this printed and we'll be handing it out to students here at the start of the school year. I've talked a lot about the content of each of these courses. However, this class does not look like a standard academic class. It is very rarely an instructor standing at the front of the room lecturing to students. Occasionally there is content that we need to get across, but instead we are typically learning through action. So for example, this is a picture of our students playing lacrosse on campus, just on Central Quad. And we do this every single semester. One, because lacrosse is fun and our students like to play, but we can also connect this through each of the theme years. So this year during language, we will emphasize the language that you can use while playing games. And what we've found is that inhibitions actually are lowered when you're out doing something fun like playing a game. Language learning is hard. Everybody wants to not make mistakes. But if you're out playing a game, a lot of times you're more willing to just jump in and start talking and using as much language as possible. So, this is one way in which we're engaging with activity rather than with just lecturing. And this is true across every year. During the ecology class, we have a foods day where we make Myaamia foods. We take hikes. There's a variety of things that we do with our students. And then in their senior year, our students do a senior project. And the goal of this project is that they combine knowledge that they've learned in the Myaamia Heritage Program with what they've learned in their major or minor, and that it gives back to the Myaamia community. And that can be defined in whatever way the student wants to define it. That could be their immediate family. It could be the students on Miami's campus, or it could be the broader Myaamia community. And then they present their projects to all of our students and staff at the end of the year. These projects are really wide-ranging. We have students who do really tangible, physical projects. So for example, this is a picture of one of our seniors from last year. She is an art major, and so she actually created an art collection for her senior project and exhibited it in the art building. So we were all able to go to see her art, to have her give us a tour. And it was a really beautiful example of her showing her growth as a Myaamia person through art. We've had students who have made bow and arrows, who've done hide painting. There are these really physical, tangible projects. But there's a lot of students who also want to kind of do more thought projects, thinking about how to create lesson plans that could be incorporated into our summer youth programs. Even when it comes to lacrosse, we've had students who were in kinesiology and did projects about how to learn how to use our wooden lacrosse sticks if you've been used to using metal and plastic contemporary sticks. So they can choose their whatever project they want to do, and then they're paired with a staff member to really help them think through that project and create something that can be turned in at the end of the year. Excuse me. So in addition to those required pieces of the program, our students actually tell us that it's the optional opportunities, the things that we do in addition to the class, that are the most meaningful to them and often have the biggest impact on the way that they think about themselves as a Myaamia person. So that could be something as simple as hanging out in Bonham House. Bonham House is on the corner of Oak and Spring. The Myaamia Center is now in the whole building, and we have a specific Myaamia student room for our students that has couches and beanbag chairs. It has a computer where they can do their classwork or they can print. And it's an opportunity for students to just hang out with each other, to see our staff on a regular basis. And it's right in the center of campus, so a lot of times students come in between classes or to eat lunch or those types of things. In addition, students can attend trips with us. We take a bus to Myaamia, Oklahoma every January for the tribe's winter gathering. So that's what this picture on the right is from, students who went on that trip with us just last year. And this is a really unique opportunity because I'll show you in a minute that our students come from across the country, and many of them have not had the opportunity to spend time in Oklahoma near our tribal headquarters. So we like for as many of our students as possible to take that trip with us, get to engage with the larger Myaamia community and specifically our elected officials. This year, we also took a trip to northern Indiana to sites in our homelands that are important to us. And so, again, many of our students had never been to some of these locations and had the opportunity to engage with spaces that have been important and continue to be important for Myaamia people. We also put in place workshops. So we have done moccasin making workshops, we've done ribbon work workshops, earring workshops. These things come from requests that our students make of us. So they come to us and say, I'm really interested in learning how to do this. And then we try to make that happen. So sometimes we have the knowledge among our staff, or sometimes we bring in outsiders, typically community members from across the country. So for example, for our moccasin workshop, which I think I have a picture of in a second, we brought one of our community members who specializes in making regalia. And our students can also serve as counselors for our summer youth programs. So we have camps for ages 6 to 9, as well as 10 to 16. And we have about 20 counselors across those programs each summer. And the vast majority of those are students who are currently at Miami University. And our students tell us that even though those are programs intended for those younger age groups, they end up learning as much from the participants as they think the participants do. So, for example, here is one of the trips that we took to the winter gathering in Oklahoma. This is in our council house, the big building in Myaamia, Oklahoma, where many of our events take place. And during that weekend, we do stomp dancing and storytelling. We eat a lot of meals together. It's really about having an opportunity for Myaamia people from across the country to come together. And so we want our students to be able to experience that. So we take a charter bus each year. We cover the vast majority of the costs of the bus as well as hotel rooms, because we don't want costs to be something that prohibits our students from engaging with opportunities like this. Here is an example of one of those workshops. So our relative Scott Shoemaker, he came to teach us, and in one weekend we went from, you can see in the picture on the left there, a raw hide. So we ordered literally deer hides, and our students learned how to make a template, how to cut out that hide, and to actually sew them into a finished pair of moccasins, which you can see in the picture on the right there. Everybody got at least one of their moccasins completed in that weekend and were able to complete them on their own after the workshop. And this, again, was something that one of our students requested of us. And so we were really excited to be able to make that happen. Outside of class, our students are able to also engage with us in several of the projects that we have going on around ecology. This might be things like, on the left-hand side, growing Myaamia corn, minjipe. So we have our own version of, it's a white hard corn that was similar to the language. It was almost lost. We actually are able to grow it today only because there were a couple of cobs of corn that were saved by a community member. And so every few years, we don't plant every single year usually, but every few years we will plant the corn so that we can replenish our seed stock. And our students are an important part of the labor that goes into actually being able to plant and care for and harvest that corn. And then you see a picture there on the right of students who are maple sugaring. So Myaamia people, sugar is a very important part culturally of our diet. And it is a very intensive process to tap maple trees and to then boil it down, either to, today, mostly syrup, but also to sugar. And so we tap trees on campus every year. We have 10 trees that we tap, and you have to go out every single day for a certain period of time to collect that sap, to store it, and then to boil it down. And it really is our students who have taken on this process and do probably 85 to 90% of the work for that process each year. And they've told us that these types of things are allowing them to connect with each other, but also to make the culture not feel like it's something that's a part of history. It's not just something that our ancestors do. This is what it means to be a Myaamia person today. And we also like to mark transitions for our students as much as possible. And one of the biggest ones, obviously, is graduation. So this is a picture of our students who just graduated in May. There were 6 of them. And so we provide them with a couple of gifts at the end of their time here at Miami. You can see that they're wearing stoles, and those are stoles that are created by Karen Baldwin, who works for the Miami Tribe Cultural Resource Office. And they have hand-stitched ribbon work at the bottom, which is a Myaamia art form. They have some embroidery with Myaamia language. And these are provided for students so that they can wear them at graduation to mark that they have, reached this transition point where they have completed the Myaamia Heritage Program and are going out into the world. They're also holding wooden lacrosse sticks, which are made for them by another community member, Doug Pakongi. And they each have the Myaamia Heritage logo painted on them. And so these are wonderful mementos that our students can take to remind them of everything that they learned during their 4 years at Miami. So where do our students come from, and what is their experience prior to coming to Miami? We just created this map this past year because we reached a really wonderful experience of having 100 graduates of our program. So we wanted to kind of be reflecting back on where do these students come from, and you can see that primarily they're coming from here in Ohio and Indiana, and that makes sense, right? These students are closer to Miami, just like other Miami students. It's easier to go away to college if you're a little bit closer to home, right? But you're seeing quite a few students coming from the Plains, the Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma area, and then really students from all across the country, East Coast, West Coast. And before coming to Miami, these students have had a really wide variety of experiences. Some of them have engaged with us through our summer youth programs since the time that they were small children. And we've known them, we've known their families, their parents, their grandparents. And other students have not had the opportunity to engage with the tribal nation at all prior to coming to Miami. So we find that it's really a challenge because our students come in with a really broad previous knowledge base and previous experience. But we really try to lean into and use that as a strength because it allows us to ask our students who are more knowledgeable to help teach students. But they also are very different depending on the topic. So some might be stronger in language, but another may be stronger in art. And so they really work together as a community through their knowledge building process. I also wanted to show this graph because it shows just how much our program has grown over the years. So I told you that in the first decade, there really was not much for Myaamia students outside of just receiving financial aid. And I think that was part of the reason why we didn't have as many students who are here early on. There was not the support system. There was not the Myaamia Center. And there were not as many families who are choosing to send their students to Miami. But after we started implementing these additional pieces, more and more families have started sending their students, and the numbers have just grown consistently over time. So we started with 3 students. This coming year, we will have 44 Myaamia students, our largest number by far to date. And what we found is that many of these students have immediate family members, so siblings and cousins who've already been a part of the program as well. So I want to talk just a little bit about student outcomes, and I'm not going to dig into this too much because that's actually one of the topics of the next webinar, which is in October, that is going to focus on our assessment program and what we have found through that assessment. But we are seeing really great things coming out of our program. We are seeing continued growth. So I just showed you that that graph that shows growth year over year. We currently have 106 graduates of this program. That might not seem like a giant number, but our community, we're just over 6,000 tribal citizens. So having 100 plus graduates of any one single institution is actually huge. Miami is a household name for the Miami tribe, and it's a place where people really trust to send their students. We're also seeing increased academic attainment. Before the start of the Myaamia Heritage courses in 2003, our students did not have a great graduation rate. We were about 56% graduation of Myaamia students. But if we look at 2003 to current, we've increased that dramatically to 92% graduation rate, which is actually higher than Miami's average graduation rate. So what we're seeing is that by providing support and by providing a culturally relevant education to our students, they are doing better academically. But just as importantly to us, they are telling us that they have a better understanding of who they are as Myaamia people when they leave, and also that because of this experience, that they want to give back to our community. And we're seeing that in a variety of ways. So most of the staff in our summer youth programs, and now I think there's probably 15 or more staff members, are graduates of Miami University. Many of our cultural practitioners, our storytellers, our stomp dancers are coming from this. We have Miami Nation Enterprises, the business side of the tribe, has a board, and 3 of the 5 board members came through this program. So what we're seeing is that we are fostering the next generation of Myaamia people who are committed and involved citizens of our tribal nation. So I might take a couple of questions because I do want to transition to talking a little bit about the 50th anniversary. A couple of questions that came in. One question is, can outsiders take the Myaamia courses? No, the course is really only for Myaamia students. And again, mostly because we're trying to do that community building. And as soon as we start allowing other students to join, that feels very different. But there are a couple of other classes on Miami's campus that I would suggest to non-Myaamia students, including the History of the Miami Tribe class, which is taught by Dr. Cameron Shriver, who gave the last webinar. And so there are opportunities for other students to take coursework. We also do a lot of class visits. We put on programming. So there's many opportunities for other students to engage with this. A question that came in about whether graduates have gone on to be involved in tribal leadership. This program is only about 30 years old. So none have gone on to date to run for or be elected to elected leadership. But like I just mentioned, many of our cultural leaders are actually coming from this program, our teachers, people involved with the business side as well. So there was a question about eligibility for this program. So one thing I want to say is that to be a Myaamia citizen, you have to prove that you are a descendant of a Myaamia person. And, at the time of treaties and removal, Myaamia people were very well documented. So we have many different lists of all of the Myaamia people who were alive at different points in time. And so you can prove that you are a descendant of one of those people to become a citizen of the tribe. So that means when you apply to Miami University, what you need to do is show your enrollment card that you are an enrolled citizen of the tribe. And that's how we ensure that Myaamia students are the ones that are receiving the Heritage Award. And then there's a couple of questions about our involvement with other departments on campus. Today we're focusing on our students, but outside of the student experience, our staff works with many different departments across campus on projects. For example, we hire graduate students from computer science to build much of our technology. So our dictionary, our archival software is all coming from computer science students at Miami University. So whenever we have a need, we most of the time will try to find somebody on campus who has that expertise. There is a question about whether Myaamia students are encouraged to live in the same dorm for their first year. The answer to that is no. One of the things that we try to really balance in this program is that we hope that students will engage with us to whatever level they want to. And many students, this is one of their main activities when they're at Miami. However, we want students to take advantage of all of the other opportunities that Miami has as well. That might be clubs and organizations, fraternities and sororities, study abroad. And so we try to balance, how do we create a strong community? How do we build a program that's useful to students? But we don't want to take away from those other opportunities. So I could imagine that at some point in the future, our students would ask to create something like a living learning community where they live all together. But that hasn't happened yet. And so we aren't going to create it without students telling us that they want to do something like that. And then a question came in about, have there been discussions of opening up this program to people who aren't at Miami University, who maybe can't participate for some reason? And the answer is yes. Of course, we've been thinking about this for a long time. Our community lives in diaspora. We're geographically separated from one another. And technology is going to be a huge part of how we connect. And COVID has pushed us forward in that process even more. So we are actually in the process right now of creating an online educational portal that will be available to any tribal citizen that will do a variety of things like asynchronous or synchronous courses. It will connect people to all of our current software, like our dictionary. And I think that is a 4-year grant. So we're hoping that by the end of that 4 years, we have something that is really built to do at distance education. So I might go back to the last few slides here and talk about the 50th anniversary, and then we can answer a few more questions at the end. So I mentioned that we've had a couple of important milestones. 2021 was the 30th anniversary of the Heritage Award, as well as the 20th anniversary of the Myaamia Center, and that we are celebrating the 50th anniversary this year. And then that, some of these student milestones, over 100 graduates and our largest class of students, we really want to celebrate these things because they are so important to us as a community. So this year, we are actually doing a year-long celebration across campus. This webinar is one outcome of that celebration. I want to make sure that you all know about the Myaamia Heritage logo, which is part of that 50th anniversary logo. It really represents the relationship between the Miami tribe and Miami University. It has really deep meaning. And if you would like to learn more about it, you can go to the Miami Tribe Relations webpage. And there's a really wonderful video that was created by one of the designers. But we're using that in a variety of ways through this 50th anniversary. We are going to have several events this year. Some of them have already happened. So we had a kickoff event for the 50th anniversary in Oklahoma at the tribe's winter gathering. We had our Myaamia conference in April, where the Myaamia Center presents on many of our activities. All of those are available online as well if you're interested. But coming up, we're going to have what we're calling our Fall Celebration Week. This is going to take place November 6th through the 13th, and there will be events every single day on Miami's campus. We are going to have a very large public kickoff event, but we are also partnering with athletics. There will be football and hockey games. There will be academic style presentations, student life events. We'll work with campus services to have things like Myaamia food in the dining hall. The goal of this is that there's 1 week in which, if our Myaamia community can come to campus, that they can experience all of the different things that we do across campus. Like here's a picture of a lacrosse event that we had last semester, where students were able to learn how to use our wooden lacrosse sticks. There are also a couple of educational initiatives that are coming out of the 50th anniversary. We are releasing a docuseries that will be released in fall 2022. During that Celebrating Miami Week, we actually will have a release party for that. It will be a 9-part docuseries talking about the tribe and our relationship with Miami University. We also are in the process of publishing a history book that was written by Dr. Cameron Shriver about the relationship between the tribe and university that's expected to be released in 2023. There's also a couple of commemorative items that are being produced. So this photo shows a blanket that was designed by a designer with the Miami Tribe and Miami University, and actually is sold in Miami's bookstore as well as online on the Die Hard webpage. And we're also in the process of creating a commemorative holiday ornament that will be sold by the Alumni Association as well. So if you are interested in an item that helps commemorate this anniversary, those are available. I like to end a lot of my presentations with this photo because I think this relationship is really hard to explain, and it's so many things, but at the end of the day, to me, it's a feeling of what it feels like to come together and learn from each other. And so you might recognize President Crawford. He is actually in Oklahoma. He's playing a game of Moccasina against our chief, Chief Doug Langford. And to me, this shows the energy that there is behind this relationship and behind coming together and really celebrating learning from each other. So if you would like to learn more, there are a couple of ways that you can do that through either the Myaamia Center or the Miami Tribe Relations webpage. We have created a podcast that talks about our relationship and its impact on revitalization. We also have a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for if you're interested in staying up to date on everything that we're doing. And then finally, I would like to mention that much of this work that we do with students is only possible because we do fundraising to help us to pay for these things. And so we do have a Move in Miami campaign right now that will go towards supporting Myaamia student experiences. So if you are interested, you can find that page on the Move in Miami page. It's titled Myaamia Support. So with that, I think we have time for maybe just a couple of final questions. This right here, Kochimatawe, just means ask me questions.
Great. Thanks, Kara. Yeah, we've had a couple come in. I know that you've answered some throughout, so that's great. One on here that I thought was really interesting is how much interaction, if any, has there been between the Myaamia Center and the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian?
Yes, I would say, quite a bit. The Myaamia Center is also the home for National Breath of Life, which is an organization that actually shares language revitalization with other communities who are trying to do the same thing, other tribal nations. And we have hosted the National Breath of Life at the Smithsonian NMAI, the National Museum of the American Indian, a couple of times. So we know much of their staff, and we've worked with them on a few different projects. So we know them quite well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So another one came in about the senior projects. I know you mentioned the one with the student in the art museum. What are some other examples? And then can you say any more about the material and the ecological perspectives and current issues classes?
Sure. So let's see, even this year, we have a few different examples of senior projects that we could talk to. We had a student who was a marketing student, and what they did is they actually took a look at our entire social media and came up with a plan for how to improve our social media presence. So that's actually a wonderful thing that is getting put into place right now. We also had a student who wrote a children's book and wrote and illustrated it. So really that's up to the students to figure out exactly what it is that they want to do. In the Ecological Perspectives class, We are really trying to help our students to understand that there is a very different way of looking at our environment if you come from a Myaamia perspective. It's about having a strong connection to our environment because our Myaamia knowledge system is really tied to ecology. And so the more that you can strengthen that tie to ecology, the better you can have an understanding of our knowledge system overall.
Gotcha. I think we got time for a couple more here. And this one's a kind of, there's multiple here, so just bear with me. But any thoughts on how the program has influenced or is influencing the university? And is there any interest on the part of other universities in engaging with tribes whose lands are now occupied in developing this type of program, land grant universities in particular?
I think this question is really interesting because I've heard a lot from Daryl Baldwin, who is our executive director. He was the first staff person at the Myaamia Center. And when he arrived, he talked with the chief at that time, Chief Floyd Leonard. And Chief Leonard told him, "You are there to serve your tribal nation. You are not there to change the institution." And Daryl really took that to heart. And so he spent all of his time and energy doing things that support our tribal nation. But what happened is as he did that, we were able to share it with the university. People were able to learn from that. And I think the university has changed quite a lot over the past 30 years and has engaged in this relationship in new and deepening ways. And I think it's thinking about the connection with tribal people and with their history a lot different today than they did in 2001 when Daryl arrived.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Anything about the other, maybe other,
Yeah, there's many other universities who I think are interested in connecting with tribes. It is not a super easy process. And I think that you have to be really unique in finding connection points because the way that universities work and the way that tribes work, there's not always going to work the same way. So, for example, as part of our relationship, Miami University allows the Miami tribe to have intellectual property rights over anything that's created at the Myaamia Center. That's very important that the university should not have ownership over our tribal knowledge. But that is not normal for universities. And so when we talk with people about this relationship and about these pieces that are so important, it can be really hard for them to kind of give up some of that control. And the same can happen for the tribe as well. And so it's a slow process. It's one that's for us taken 50 years. And many other universities are just at the beginning of that process.
Gotcha. All right. I think I've got one more here that would like to ask as we're getting past our hour here. But are there any Heritage Program graduates that are now Miami University employees?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few. All of us, let's see, there are, I'd have to think about this, I think 8, and we all work at the Myaamia Center. So one of the things that we like to say is that to do this work, which is very unique, that we have to grow our own. And so we put these educational initiatives, our summer youth programs, the Myaamia Heritage Program, were all created with the understanding that after a generation or two, there would be new Myaamia intellectuals who would be able to take on and move this work forward. And that is really coming to fruition even over the past decade. And so I'm a graduate. I got my graduate degree. George Ironstrack, who works in the education office. Christina Fox works with him as well. My sister Haley Shea, Jared Baldwin. So there's a whole group of us who have actually graduated from Miami University. And it's such an important process because this is the time in which you have the most concentrated amount of time to engage with our tribal nation. People are out living their lives, trying to learn a new language and practice cultural practices. It's hard if it's in addition to your normal life. But by coming to Miami University and being a part of this project, our students are really able to focus some extended time. And so we find that it's a really wonderful opportunity and allows them to kind of move forward in their understanding at a greater pace.
Well, yeah, this has been so great. Thank you so much for being a part of this today, Kara. Really appreciate it. It's a great and such an insightful webinar. In this webinar, this Myaamia Center webinar series is a 6-part series, as Kara has mentioned, and it's going throughout 2022. So the previous 3 webinars and this one we just had are going to be available on our webinar platform at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. So that's ALUMLC.org/MIAMIOH. That's where you can find this webinar and the other webinars that we've done within this series. And the next webinar for this series is on Wednesday, October 12th at noon. And that webinar is titled Examining the Impact of Language and Cultural Revitalization on Myaamiaki. So again, thank you so much, Kara, for being here and being a part of this. Thanks to all of those out there who have watched us today. We've had a great webinar, and I hope you've enjoyed. So on behalf of the Miami University Alumni Association, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Love and honor.